Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Arriving to visit her mother in the village, the girl was surprised to see her fiancé's car by the gate. Entering the house, she heard her mother crying in strange words that instantly shattered her sense of reality. The morning mist wrapped around the village streets as Lucia cast one last look at her blooming garden, each blossom a result of her care, patience, and love for this small world she was now leaving behind. She adjusted the strap of her backpack and inhaled deeply the scent of damp earth, trying to memorize it. There would be nothing like it in the city. "Lucia, breakfast is getting cold," her mother's voice called from the house. Carmen Rodriguez stood at the stove, placing golden tortillas onto a plate. Her hands, cracked from constant labor, moved with practiced confidence, though her eyes held a worry she failed to hide. "I'm not hungry, Mama. My stomach's in knots," Lucia said as she perched on the edge of the chair, twisting a chestnut lock of hair around her finger. "You need strength for the road." "It's a long journey," Carmen insisted. Lucia obediently took up her fork. The creaky wooden floor under her mother's feet seemed to count down the last minutes of their shared morning. How many times had she heard that sound in her 18 years, and how soon would she hear it again? "You're sure you'll manage?" Carmen looked out the window, avoiding her daughter's gaze. "The city doesn't forgive weakness. Mama, we've talked about this 100 times. I don't just want this, I have to get an education. You said it yourself, knowledge is the only thing no one can take away." Carmen sighed and finally turned around. "I'm not worried about the knowledge. I'm worried about you being alone, with no support." "You were alone too," Lucia gently reminded her, "and you raised me." Carmen flinched, as if her daughter had touched an open wound. "That's exactly why I'm worried." 2 hours later, they stood at the bus stop, a crumbling concrete shelter with chipped paint and dusty windows, which looked like a gateway to a new life. The old bus was already pulling up to the platform. "Keep your money in a safe place," her mother repeated for the third time, "and write me as soon as you get there." Lucia hugged her, feeling her mother's thin shoulders tremble from restrained tears. "It'll be okay," she promised, not knowing if she was trying to convince her mother or herself. As the bus pulled away, Lucia pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Her thoughts spun in chaos, for years saving up for this, working at the post office and helping neighbors with their gardens. For years convincing Mama it was necessary. For years dreaming of this moment. So why am I so scared now? The dormitory smelled of bleach and echoed with hollow footsteps. The triple room was tiny, with sagging beds and a single wardrobe for all. Her roommates, Maribel from Valencia and Soledad from the suburbs, seemed friendly enough, though cautious, just like Lucia. The first week flew by in the rush of adapting to student life. Classes at the culinary college demanded full commitment, but Lucia was prepared. In the evenings, she wrote detailed letters to her mother, omitting the struggles and emphasizing the joyful moments. Carmen replied with short notes, filled with village gossip and motherly care. On Friday, her roommates invited her to the movies, but Lucia declined. Every euro needed to be saved. With the room empty, she decided to treat herself to a real dinner instead of another sandwich. Returning with groceries, Lucia froze in the doorway. Something was off. Her eyes went to the bed. The lower drawer was pulled out. Her heart skipped a beat. She rushed forward, dropped to her knees, and reached under the mattress where she kept an envelope with her savings. It was gone. The room blurred. Her savings for the entire semester, her mother's contributions, her own side jobs, vanished. One thought pounded in her mind: what do I do now? Her first instinct was to call her mother, but that thought vanished just as quickly. Carmen had sold their only cow to help her daughter. I can't let her down. Lucia ran into the hallway, not even knowing what she was looking for. From the perpetually sour-faced floor attendant, she learned that no one suspicious had been seen. Returning to her room, she bumped into a stranger standing in a dim corner. "Sorry," she mumbled, trying to pass. "Was it your money that got stolen?" he asked suddenly. Lucia stopped in her tracks. "How do you know?" I saw your roommate digging around your bed while you were in class. Soledad, I think. His face, half lit by a flickering bulb, looked serious. I'm Miguel. I live one floor up. Lucia didn't know whether to believe him. Soledad had seemed so friendly. Could she really? She's got a junkie brother, Miguel continued, reading her thoughts. He drains her for money every month. This isn't the first time. Why are you helping me? Lucia asked warily. He shrugged. Because I was in your shoes once. Tell you what, I'll help you get the money back, and you cook me dinner. Deal? Lucia hesitated. She'd always handled things on her own. But right now, she had no choice. Deal, she said, offering her hand. His hand was rough and warm. To her surprise, she found herself not wanting to let go. Miguel's plan was simple and effective. They waited for Soledad to return from a nightclub, and Miguel bluntly confronted her, threatening to go to the police. Panicked, she returned the money and moved out the next day. That evening, Lucia kept her promise. In the shared kitchen, she prepared a simple but fragrant dinner. Miguel sat nearby, chopping vegetables. Where are you from? He asked, watching her confident hands. El Olivo. About 300 kilometers from here. So you're a village girl, he said with respect, not mockery. Hardworking, I can tell. And you? From the city? Not exactly. A small town. My mom's a teacher, I'm her only child. I transferred here last year to study engineering. They talked about everything, childhood, dreams, favorite books. Miguel spoke of his part-time jobs on construction sites and his dream to start his own business. Lucia told stories of village life and her passion for cooking. You know the difference between city folks and country folks? Miguel asked as they finished dinner. People from the country know how to appreciate the simple things, good food, a warm home, and honest conversation. Lucia smiled, blushing. There was something about this guy, a quiet reliability she'd only ever felt from her mother. Can I walk you to your room? He asked, helping her clear the table. At the door, he took her hand. You're going to be just fine here, Lucia. I believe in you. That night, lying in bed, Lucia couldn't sleep. In her letter to her mother, she mentioned a new friend for the first time and even included a photo of them together. It felt important that her mother knew about Miguel. Carmen sat by the window, staring at the photo her daughter had sent. The young man beside Lucia smiled openly, sincerely. There was something vaguely familiar in his features, stirring unease and a strange premonition. She set the photo aside and closed her eyes. The past she had tried so hard to keep buried had begun to stir like an old wound before a storm. Meanwhile, Lucia fell asleep smiling, unaware that fate was already weaving a complex web, linking past and present into a single pattern she would soon be forced to unravel. 3 months passed in a flash. Winter blanketed the city in snow, turning bleak streets into scenes from a fairy tale. Lucia watched snowflakes fall outside the lecture hall window during a class on dessert techniques. The teacher passionately described the intricacies of working with caramel, but Lucia's thoughts kept drifting to Miguel. After that first dinner, they saw each other almost every day. First it was shared meals, then city walks, and soon they couldn't imagine being apart. Today they were meeting at the college cafeteria, and Lucia found herself checking the time again and again. Your boy's waiting, her friend Natalia whispered, nodding toward the door. Lucia turned and saw Miguel leaning against the frame, smiling that heart-flipping smile. Can I steal your student? He asked the professor as the bell rang. Just return her by exam time, the teacher joked. They walked hand in hand through the snowy college park. Lucia's cheeks were rosy from cold and happiness. I've got news, Miguel said, stopping under an old oak tree. I got us an apartment. It's a studio on the outskirts, rented, but ours. Lucia's heart skipped a beat. You want us to live together? He looked her straight in the eyes. I know it's only been 3 months, but I've never been more sure. Lucia weighed the pros and cons. The dorm had become unbearable since Soledad left. The new roommate was worse, always bringing guys over, throwing parties. And more importantly, she had never felt so close to anyone as she did with Miguel. "My mom's going to kill me," she muttered, but her eyes were already sparkling. "So, yes?" Miguel grabbed her waist and spun her around. "Yes," she laughed, warmth spreading through her chest. The apartment was tiny, one room, a kitchen the size of a closet, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in, but it was theirs, warm and cozy. Their first evening was spent cooking dinner. The cramped kitchen filled with the scent of spices and the sound of laughter. Their hands touched as they passed ingredients, and each touch sent a thrill through them. "Will you teach me to cook?" Miguel asked, watching her expertly chop vegetables. "But you're an engineer." "Cooking is just another kind of engineering. You mix ingredients, measure proportions, regulate temperature, and you get a masterpiece," he said, pulling her close. Like in a fairy tale, days turned into weeks, weeks into months. They learned to live together, to compromise, to forgive small flaws. Miguel worked part-time on construction sites and at a garage. Lucia gave cooking lessons to the neighborhood children. Money was tight, but they felt like the richest people in the world. They spent their weekends building their small world together. Lucia turned the balcony into a mini greenhouse, covering the windowsills with pots of flowers and fragrant herbs. In the mornings, they had breakfast while watching the sunlight filter through the leaves, painting the room in shades of green. One evening, returning from class, Lucia found Miguel engaged in an odd activity, sorting through old photographs. "What's that?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Mom sent them." "Sid, it's time you saw your roots," he smiled, but there was a nervous edge to it. Lucia looked through the photos with interest, a middle-aged woman with stern features, clearly his mother. A young man in military uniform, likely his father. "Tell me about them," she asked. Miguel sighed. "Not much to say about my mother. Spanish teacher, worked at the same school all her life. Strict but fair. I barely remember my father, he left when I was 5. Santiago Fernandez, retired captain. All I have are these photos." "What's your middle name?" Lucia began cautiously. "Santiago," Miguel nodded. "At least I got that from him." Lucia froze. A strange coincidence, her middle name was Santiago too. She had never known her father, her mother never liked to talk about him. Once, she had briefly mentioned that he was in the military and had been stationed in their region. "Is something wrong?" Miguel noticed her reaction. No, it's fine," she replied quickly. "I just thought, maybe we should introduce our moms to each other. They both raised us alone, after all." Miguel's face lit up. "Great idea. We could visit my mom next weekend. She's been asking." Elena Martinez lived in a typical apartment, with impeccably tidy rooms and old furniture. When Miguel introduced Lucia, the woman froze, as if she had seen a ghost. "Very nice to meet you," she finally said, shaking Lucia's hand. Elena remained perfectly polite all evening, but Lucia could sense the tension. The woman often fell silent mid-sentence, studying Lucia's face as though searching for something familiar. "Tell me about your family, Lucia," Elena said as they sat down for tea. "It's just me and my mom. Carmen Rodriguez works in the village library." "And your father?" Elena asked sharply. "Mama," Miguel objected. "It's okay," Lucia touched his hand gently. "I never knew my father. He left before I was born." "What's your mother's surname?" Elena continued. "Rodriguez." The teacup trembled in Elena's hand. Tea spilled onto the tablecloth. "Excuse me," she muttered, quickly rising. "I forgot the pie in the oven." When Elena left for the kitchen, Miguel looked at Lucia apologetically. "I'm sorry. I don't know what's gotten into her, she's not usually like this." "It's okay," Lucia squeezed his hand. "Maybe I reminded her of someone." The rest of the evening passed tensely. Elena didn't ask any more personal questions, but Lucia felt her gaze, watchful and almost hostile. On the way back, Miguel was unusually quiet. "Sorry about my mom," he finally said. "I don't know what happened." "It's not your fault," Lucia replied gently. "You know what? Let's invite her over, with my mom. Maybe they have something to talk about." Carmen accepted the invitation without much enthusiasm, but didn't refuse either. Lucia sensed her mother was hiding something, especially whenever Miguel's name came up. "Did you say his middle name is Santiago?" Carmen asked when Lucia was talking about her fiancé. "Yes." "Why?" "No reason. Just an unusual coincidence," Carmen said with a note of worry Lucia didn't understand. What was so strange about the coincidence? Meanwhile, her relationship with Miguel grew stronger. They made plans for the future, dreamed of a house, even picked names for future children. One spring Saturday, Miguel suggested a walk to the city pond. The day was unusually warm. They wandered along the shore, collecting smooth stones and skipping them across the water. As the sun began to set, Miguel suddenly pulled her close, paused, and looked tenderly into her eyes, as if trying to see into her soul. Then he said, "Lucia Santiago Rodriguez," he declared, pulling a small box from his pocket, "will you marry me?" Inside was a simple silver ring with a tiny stone, not a diamond, but to Lucia, it was more beautiful than any treasure in the world. "Yes," she whispered, tears of joy running down her cheeks. Miguel slid the ring onto her finger, and they stood there in a long embrace, watching the sunset reflect on the dark water. Lucia felt both light and anxious inside. A vague sense of dread stirred in her heart. Why, at the height of happiness, did she feel a sudden, unexplainable fear? "Is something wrong?" Miguel asked, noticing her expression. "Everything's fine," Lucia smiled, brushing the thought away. "I just can't believe I'm this happy." That evening, they decided to visit Lucia's mother the following weekend to share the news and officially introduce Miguel to his future mother-in-law. They had no idea that this trip would change their lives forever. Elena Martinez stood by the window, clutching an old photo album to her chest. Her son's call about the engagement should have made her happy, but instead, she felt icy dread. A family secret she had buried for years threatened to break loose and destroy her only son's happiness. She opened the album to a faded photo. A young girl in a cotton dress stared back, Lucia's mirror image, but with different eyes. Beside her stood a young officer who looked exactly like Miguel. "Carmen," Elena whispered, running her finger over the face of her old rival. "What have you done?" "The weather should be nice this weekend," Miguel said, packing clothes into a gym bag. "I hope your mom appreciates my fishing skills." Lucia smiled, closing her suitcase. "The only fish she respects are the ones from our village pond. Says the spring water gives them a special flavor." Challenge accepted, Miguel saluted playfully. "By the way, do you think I should bring wine? It is a formal introduction and engagement, after all." "Mama doesn't drink," Lucia shook her head, "but let's bring some good tea and those cherry-filled chocolates she loves." The 2 weeks after the engagement felt like floating. Lucia sometimes thought it all seemed too perfect, like a fairy tale. And fairy tales always had trials. But she shook off the thoughts as baseless worries. The day before the trip, she had a long phone call with her mother, giving her the details. Carmen sounded anxious, asking several times for Miguel's full name. When Lucia mentioned that they shared the same middle name, silence filled the line so suddenly that she thought the call had dropped. "Mama, are you there?" Yes, Carmen's voice sounded strange. "Just interference." "So, when are you arriving?" "Saturday morning by bus. Miguel's driving, but I want him to see the village from the bus window, just like I did the first time." "All right, sweetie. I'll be waiting." Something in her mother's voice made Lucia uneasy, but she chose to ignore it. She's probably just nervous about the big meeting. The road to the village took 4 hours. The weather turned unexpectedly gloomy. Rain-drenched fields flanked the road, and the low gray sky promised more downpours. Miguel's old car, recently bought with his part-time job savings, fought bravely against the wind and the slippery road. "See those olive groves?" Lucia pointed out the window, recognizing familiar landmarks with growing excitement. "Just beyond them is our pond. I almost drowned there as a kid, swimming without permission." "A rebel from the start," Miguel chuckled, squeezing her hand. "Don't worry, everything will go fine. Your mom will love me. She just needs to like you," Lucia said seriously. "That's what matters to me." They arrived around noon. The small whitewashed wooden house looked the same as in Lucia's childhood, except the fence paint was more peeled, and the olive trees in the yard had grown taller. "We're here," Lucia said joyfully, then froze. "Wait, is that your car?" A familiar dark blue seat was parked at the gate, identical to Miguel's. Lucia looked at him, confused. "I don't understand," Miguel began, but the gate creaked open, and Elena Martinez stepped onto the porch. "Mom?" Miguel stared at her in shock. "What are you doing here?" "Son," her voice trembled, "we need to talk. All of us." A chill ran down Lucia's spine, not from the rain, but from an eerie sense of dread. She was the first to enter the house, her heart pounding in her chest. The kitchen smelled of paella. Carmen stood at the stove, her eyes red from crying. "Mama, what's going on?" Lucia ran to her. "Why is Elena here?" Carmen hugged her tightly, as if trying to shield her from an invisible threat. "Sit down, children," she said quietly. "We need to tell you something." They sat at the table, Miguel and Lucia side by side, their mothers across from them. The air was thick with tension. "I'll start," Carmen exhaled. "Lucia, remember you once asked about your father? I always told you he was a soldier stationed in our region." "Yes," and Lucia grabbed Miguel's hand, nausea rising with the feeling that something awful was coming. "His name was Santiago Fernandez," Carmen said, and Lucia's world began to collapse. Miguel jumped up. "That's a mistake. My father couldn't have." "Sit down, son," Elena placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let them finish." "Back then," Carmen said, glancing at Elena, "we worked together on the same finca. And we both loved the same man. Santiago was a captain," Elena continued. "Handsome, charismatic. All the girls were drawn to him. But he chose me. We got married, and a year later, Miguel was born." "I don't understand," Lucia murmured. "If he was your husband, then how?" "He was cheating on me," Elena's voice turned hard. "With Carmen. While I was home with baby Miguel, he was visiting her. I didn't find out until years later." "Lucia," Carmen squeezed her daughter's hand, "your father and Miguel's father are the same man. Your brother and sister." The silence that followed those words felt tangible. Lucia felt Miguel's hand slip from hers. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. One thought screamed in her mind, "It's not true. It can't be true." "Prove it," Miguel said hoarsely. "Prove this isn't just some made-up story." Without a word, Carmen took an old photograph from the cabinet. In it, a young officer was hugging two girls, one in a prim dress, the other in a cotton sundress. "That's us," she said quietly. "Summer of '86. Miguel snatched the photo, studying the officer's features, the same eyes, the same shape of lips he saw in the mirror every day. No, he flung the photo onto the table. "I don't believe this. It's some kind of scheme, you just want to separate us." "Son," Elena began to cry. "Why would we do that? We're just as shocked." I recognized Carmen the moment I heard her last name. And when I met Lucia, she looks exactly like Carmen did when she was young. Lucia finally found her voice. "You knew all this time," she stared at Elena. "When we came to visit you, did you already suspect?" "I suspected," Elena admitted. "But I wasn't sure. I thought it might just be a coincidence." Then I saw your picture together online, how happy you looked, and I knew I had to find out the truth. That's why you came here ahead of us." Miguel's eyes darkened with anger. "To prepare this bombshell?" "I had to talk to Carmen in person," Elena nodded. "To confirm everything first." Lucia suddenly stood up, feeling the ground slipping from beneath her feet. "I need air," she whispered and ran out of the house. The cool air burned in her lungs. She wandered through the rain-soaked garden, unaware of the cold or the tears that mixed with raindrops on her cheeks. Past and present blurred into a nightmare. Every kiss, every touch with Miguel now felt like a sin. How could they not have known? How could life play such a cruel joke? The crunch of gravel behind her made her turn. Miguel stood a few steps away, pale, his face twisted in pain. "I can't believe it," he whispered. "I don't want to believe it. But we have to." Lucia felt as lost as she had during her first days in the dorm. "This is real, Miguel. We're blood." "So what now?" He took a step toward her but stopped, as if hitting an invisible wall. "Just forget everything that happened between us?" Lucia shook her head, unable to speak. The future they had so carefully planned crumbled in an instant. I can't talk about this now," she finally said. "We need time. To think. To process." "Time won't change the truth," Miguel said bitterly. "We'll still be brother and sister." Those words, spoken aloud, shattered Lucia's heart completely. The ride back to the city was torture. They sat on opposite ends of the car, not looking at each other. Rainy roads, dim headlights, oppressive silence. Every kilometer away from the village felt like another thread cut between their hearts. Lucia stared out the window but saw only shared memories, their first dinner in the tiny kitchen, rainy walks in the park, morning light filtering through balcony leaves. Everything that once felt so right was now poisoned by a terrible truth. "Where should I drop you?" Miguel's voice sounded distant and cold. "The dorm," Lucia replied quietly. "I'll ask to be let back in." "I'll pack my things tomorrow," he said, gripping the steering wheel. "You keep the apartment. It'll be easier for me to return to my mother's." "I can't accept," Lucia began. "Please," Miguel interrupted. "Don't argue about this. It's already too hard." The rest of the drive passed in silence. When the car stopped at the dorm, Lucia wanted to say something, anything comforting or final, but a lump rose in her throat. "Goodbye," she managed, stepping out of the car. "Goodbye, Lucia," Miguel echoed. She stood on the sidewalk until the red taillights of his car disappeared into the night. Only then did she allow herself to cry, not caring about the strangers casting sympathetic glances. The apartment, once their shared refuge, now felt foreign. Lucia couldn't get into the dorm, no rooms were available. She had to return to the empty home, where every corner reminded her of Miguel. His hastily packed belongings left behind hollow spaces, a half-empty closet, a bare shelf in the bathroom, a single cup on the table. Lucia curled up on the bed, staring at the ceiling where streetlight shadows danced. How do I go on? Pulsed in her mind. Classes, side jobs, plans for the future, none of it made sense anymore. Was it even worth leaving her village if her city story ended in such cruel tragedy? A knock at the door made her flinch. Could it be Miguel? Her heart betrayed her with a faster beat. But it was Elena Martinez standing at the threshold. "May I come in?" she asked. Lucia silently stepped aside. The woman looked around and noticed the traces of hasty packing. Her face twisted in pain. "I came to apologize," she said softly, "and to tell you something that might change everything." Lucia let her in wordlessly. Elena hesitated before walking deeper into the room, stopping at the window, where spring rain still drizzled outside. "I don't even know where to begin," she said, adjusting the collar of her blazer. Her posture held the composure of a lifelong teacher used to the eyes of judgmental students. "Maybe with the truth," Lucia replied dully. "At least now." Elena sat down heavily, folding her hands in her lap. The truth is, girl, sometimes it's more complicated than we think. Even those who believe they know it only hold one piece of the puzzle. She pulled out an old leather wallet from her bag and took out a worn photograph. This is Santiago, Miguel's father, she said, handing it to Lucia, and according to your mother, also yours. Lucia took the photo with trembling fingers. A young man in uniform stared confidently into the camera. Something about his jawline, the shape of his eyes, it did resemble Miguel. And maybe herself. Why did you come? Lucia returned the photo. To remind me that Miguel and that we never, her voice broke. I came to tell you that Santiago Fernandez was not Miguel's biological father, Elena said quietly. Time stood still. Lucia felt the blood drain from her face. What? But how, why, then? Because I never told anyone. Not him, not Miguel. No one. Elena rose and began to pace the room, unable to sit under the weight of her confession. It was the late 80s. I was young, ambitious, and madly in love with Santiago. When he noticed me, it felt like a fairy tale. A brilliant officer, handsome, from a good family, any girl would have fallen for him. She paused, staring through the wall, reliving it all vividly. But Santiago, he had a wandering eye. He loved me, I'm sure, but he couldn't resist other women, especially Carmen. She said the name with bitterness. Carmen was everything I wasn't: quiet, modest, domestic. I don't know what he saw in her, but that affair lasted for years. And you knew? Lucia asked softly. Not at first. I suspected, maybe, but didn't want to believe. When I found out, it was devastating. We fought terribly, and I did something I never should have. She took a deep breath, gathering courage. I cheated on him. Out of spite. Just once. With a military doctor from Santiago's unit who had pursued me for years. It was reckless revenge. And then I found out I was pregnant. Lucia froze, struggling to process. And you didn't tell Santiago the child might not be his? No. I wasn't even sure myself. The timelines matched closely. I took it as fate's sign, a chance to start fresh. Santiago was overjoyed when I told him. He believed the pregnancy would heal our rift. And it did, for a while. She sat back down, her voice lower. When Miguel was born, I told him he was premature. But he wasn't. It was my way of hiding the truth, in case anything raised suspicion. Santiago adored that boy. He named him after his grandfather. Her voice faltered. And then he found out Carmen was pregnant too. My mom? Lucia's throat tightened. She never told him she was keeping the baby. She was proud, Lucia. She knew he was married and had a son. She didn't want to destroy a family. But when Santiago found out, he was torn, overwhelmed. He didn't know what to do. Tears streamed down Elena's cheeks. I couldn't accept it. I made scenes, threatened he'd never see our son. In the end, he stayed with me. But it didn't bring happiness. He drank. He broke down. He blamed himself for abandoning Carmen and her child. Our marriage became hell. When Miguel was 5, Santiago left. Said he wasn't worthy of me or the kids. And all this time you stayed silent, Lucia said, voice trembling with disbelief and hope. Even when you saw Miguel and me together? Elena let out a shaky breath. I wasn't sure. I thought it was just a strange coincidence. Your mother's surname is common. And you could have been another man's daughter. But when I saw you together, so happy, and how alike you looked, I started to question everything. But you still said nothing. Not until you learned about our engagement. I was afraid, Lucia, Elena said, voice cracking. Afraid to lose my son if he found out I'd lied to him all his life. Afraid that Santiago was Miguel's father. I thought, if it's just a passing romance, it'll fade. But when Miguel told me he proposed, I knew I had to know the truth. So you went to my mother? Yes. I had to confirm you were really Santiago's daughter. And when Carmen confirmed it, Elena reached into her bag. I decided to order a DNA test in secret. I took Miguel's hair from his comb and asked your mother to send something with your DNA. She sent your old hairbrush. She handed Lucia the envelope. Here are the results. I got them yesterday. Lucia's hand shook as she opened the envelope. The medical document was filled with technical jargon, but the conclusion was clear and highlighted: probability of biological relationship, 0%. That means Miguel and you are not siblings, Elena finished softly, and never were. Lucia felt the floor vanish beneath her. Relief, shock, disbelief, all collided in a tangle of emotions that made it hard to breathe. But why didn't you tell us immediately, back in the village, when we were all together? I didn't know then. The results came just yesterday. I had to tell Miguel first. Have you told him? Lucia stood up, ready to run to him. No, Elena shook her head. He won't answer my calls or open the door. He's locked himself in. I thought, maybe he'll listen to you. Elena Martinez lived in the old part of town, in buildings built back in the mid-20th century. Climbing the worn stairs, Lucia felt her heart pounding. What would she say to Miguel? Would he believe her? Would he even want to come back to her after everything? Elena opened the door, looking 10 years older. He still hasn't come out, she whispered. Just asked for water an hour ago. I'll try talking to him, Lucia said firmly and walked to the room Elena pointed to. She knocked softly. Miguel, it's me. Lucia. We need to talk. Silence. Please, open the door. It's important. Footsteps. A click. The door opened slightly, and there stood Miguel, gaunt, unshaven, his eyes red. What do you want? He rasped. To say goodbye for good? No, Lucia said, holding out the envelope. I came to tell you the truth. In a university dormitory, hundreds of kilometers from the city, Carmen sat across from a young man in a worn sweater. They were in a small cafe near the campus. I never thought I'd see you again, Carmen, the man said, rolling a cup of long cold coffee between his hands. So many years have passed. I wouldn't have come if it weren't absolutely necessary, Ignacio. Carmen's voice was tired but resolute. You're the only one who knows the whole truth. The man sighed, leaning back in his chair. It's not easy revisiting the past, especially the part we both tried so hard to bury. My daughter deserves the truth, Carmen said firmly. And I have to tell her. But first I need to make sure. That I won't object? Ignacio gave a bitter smile. Don't worry. I gave up my rights 20 years ago. I'm not planning to reclaim them now. Carmen studied his face closely, once handsome, now lined with deep wrinkles and shadowed eyes. Time had been unkind to him, just as it had to her. Thank you, she said softly. For everything. Don't thank me, Carmen. If I had been a real man back then, things might have turned out differently. I don't understand, Miguel said, rereading the test results while sitting on the edge of the bed. If this is true, then who is my real father? Lucia sat down beside him, careful not to touch him, afraid to scare away the fragile trust forming between them again. Your mother told me, she said gently. You should talk to her. And you believed her? Just like that? I saw the test results, and besides, Lucia lowered her eyes, I want it to be true. I miss you, Miguel. Every minute of these terrible days. He turned to her. For a moment, the warmth in his eyes returned, but it was quickly replaced with suspicion. What if it's a mistake? What if we believe it and then? The test is reliable. But if you want, we can do another one, an official one. Miguel ran a hand over his face, as if trying to wipe away the web of doubt. I don't know what to think, Lucia. There's been too many lies. My whole life I was told Santiago was my father. I believed I had his eyes, his personality. And now, it's not true. Elena hid it to protect you and your bond with Santiago. But she didn't protect us. Pain broke through in his voice. These days were the worst in my life, Lucia. Thinking I was in love with my own sister. I know, she whispered. It was a nightmare for me too. They fell silent, lost in their own thoughts. Outside, spring rain tapped on the windowsill with a soothing rhythm. What do we do now? Miguel finally asked. I don't know, Lucia answered honestly. Maybe we start over? Learn the truth about the past, figure out the present? And what about our feelings? They haven't gone anywhere, Lucia. At least mine haven't. He gently took her hand, and she didn't pull away. Mine too, she admitted. But we need time. Too much has happened. Miguel nodded. A soft knock came at the door. Kids, Elena's voice sounded uncertain. I made some tea. Miguel sighed deeply. Come in, Mom. We need to talk seriously. The student cafeteria buzzed like a hive. Lucia absent-mindedly pushed around cold paella with her fork, unable to taste or smell anything. The last week had been overwhelming. Returning to classes after everything was exhausting. Earth to Lucia? Natalia waved a hand in front of her face. Are you even with us? Sorry, I was lost in thought, Lucia forced a smile. No wonder, her friend nodded knowingly. With a guy like that, anyone's head would spin. Speaking of which, he's looking for you. Lucia looked up and saw Miguel at the cafeteria door. Their eyes met, and warmth filled her heart. I'll be right back, she muttered, rising from the table. In the hallway, Miguel handed her a bouquet of wildflowers. These are for you. Found them at the market. Thought they'd remind you of home. Thank you. Lucia buried her nose in the flowers, inhaling their familiar scent. How are you? All right. Did you talk to your mom? A lot, he said with a crooked smile. Turns out my biological father is alive and doesn't even know I exist. Can you believe it? He's now the head of surgery at a regional hospital. And do you want to meet him? I don't know, Miguel shrugged. It still feels too complicated. And you? Did you talk to your mom? Yes. She called yesterday, Lucia sighed. Said she's coming soon. I think she has more to tell. They stood in the hallway among hurried students, yet it felt like an invisible bubble had formed around them, separating them from the world. Hey, I've been thinking, Miguel spoke quickly, like he was afraid to change his mind. Maybe we could have dinner together. At my place, or a cafe? I prefer home, Lucia said quietly. Our apartment. I'll pick you up after class. She nodded, a smile spreading across her lips. I'll be waiting. After he left, Lucia stood for a long time, clutching the bouquet to her chest. Maybe life was giving them a second chance, and this time, she wouldn't let the past ruin their happiness. But deep down, she still felt unease. What other shadows from the past did neither she nor Miguel know about? The smell of fresh pastry filled the small apartment. Lucia was busy in the kitchen, preparing a special dinner. Miguel was due to arrive any minute, with their mothers. It would be the first time they all met together after that dramatic day in the village. 3 weeks had passed like a blur since the shock and the relief that followed. Lucia and Miguel were cautiously rebuilding their relationship, taking things slow, giving themselves time to heal and adjust to a new reality. The doorbell rang. Lucia wiped her hands on her apron and went to open it, heart pounding nervously. Miguel stood at the door with a huge bouquet of chrysanthemums. Behind him were Elena and Carmen, both dressed unusually formally and visibly tense. Hi, Miguel leaned in and kissed her lightly. We're a bit late, the bus with your mom was delayed. It's okay, Lucia smiled, taking the flowers. Come in, everything's ready. Carmen hugged her daughter and whispered, You've lost weight, little one. You're not taking care of yourself." "Mama, I'm fine." Lucia hugged her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of village soap and herbs. "It's just been a hard month." Elena lingered slightly behind, still burdened by guilt. She looked especially strict tonight, dark blue dress with a white collar, hair neatly styled, minimal makeup. "Thank you for inviting me, Lucia," she said calmly. "It smells wonderful. Please, come in. Take a seat." Lucia gestured to the set table. "I'll bring everything out." Dinner began in tense silence. The four of them carefully avoided sensitive topics, sticking to weather, studies, and work. Miguel talked about his part-time jobs and his course project. Lucia spoke about new recipes she'd learned. "This is delicious, darling," Carmen said, tasting the paella. "Just like my grandmother used to make." Her recipe, Lucia smiled warmly. "She's the best cook I know." "Don't be modest," Miguel added. "Lucia's a true culinary genius. She has the highest grades in the college." The conversation fell silent again. Elena poked at her vegetables, thoughtful. "I think it's time we talked about the real reason we're here," she said at last. "We didn't just come for dinner." Carmen straightened as if preparing for battle. "I agree. The kids deserve the whole truth." Miguel squeezed Lucia's hand under the table. "We're ready to listen." Carmen sighed deeply and began. "What I said in the village was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. I did love Santiago. And he really was married to Elena," she nodded toward the woman. "But he wasn't Lucia's father." "But, how?" Lucia looked from her mother to Elena in confusion. "You said." "I thought he was," Carmen admitted. "Or I wanted to believe it. But the truth is more complicated." She took a sip of water, gathering her strength. "In the summer of 1986, a group of military doctors came to our finca for routine health checks. One of them was a young specialist, Ignacio Velasquez. We got close," she said, looking down at her plate, afraid to raise her eyes. "I was young and naive. He was a well-educated city man, spoke beautifully, promised a lot. Our romance lasted the 2 weeks the medical team was there. Then he left, and never came back." "Leaving you pregnant," Lucia finished softly. Carmen nodded. "I didn't realize right away. And when I did," she gave a bitter smile. "My pride wouldn't let me run after him, beg for help. I decided I'd manage on my own." "But what does Santiago have to do with it?" Miguel asked, looking between the women. Elena tapped her fingers nervously on the table. "Well," Carmen continued, "around that time, Santiago and I started seeing each other. I already knew I was pregnant, but it didn't show yet. Santiago visited the finca for inspections. We met. He was kind and attentive. And married," Elena added dryly. "Yes," Carmen admitted. "But loneliness and fear of the future clouded my judgment. We had a brief affair, which I ended as soon as I realized I was pregnant." "Did you tell him it wasn't his child?" Lucia asked. "No. I just said I was pregnant. He assumed the baby was his and panicked. Said he wasn't ready to leave his family. That he already had a son." "Me?" Miguel asked quietly. "Yes," Elena nodded. "You were about a year old then. Santiago returned to his family," Carmen continued, "and I was left alone. When Lucia was born, I had already decided not to tell Ignacio about her. I thought it was better if she believed her father was someone who had at least been around, rather than someone who never even looked back. That's why you listed Santiago as the father on my birth certificate," Lucia realized. "Yes," Carmen nodded. "A foolish decision, I know. But back then, I thought it was the right thing. I wanted something to connect you to your father." "Who wasn't really my father," Lucia said bitterly. "No," Carmen admitted. "I'm sorry, my daughter. I got so tangled in the lies that I started to believe them myself. When Santiago left Elena, he came to visit us a few times. He looked at you and said, "I'm lucky to have such a wonderful daughter." And I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth. Elena broke the long silence. When Santiago disappeared from our lives, I was sure he went to you, Carmen. That's why I hated you all these years. And I was sure he had returned to you, Carmen confessed. We were both wrong. Where is he now? Miguel asked. No one knows, Elena looked away. Last I heard, he went to Lima. Then there were rumors of Mexico. He just vanished. Left no address. Silence fell, broken only by the ticking of the clock. Each of them was lost in thought, trying to absorb what they had heard. I found Ignacio, Carmen said suddenly. Lucia's head shot up. You found my real father? When? 2 weeks ago. I went to the regional center. Learned he works at a hospital as head of a department. We met, Carmen said, nervously wringing a napkin. He doesn't know about you, Lucia. I didn't tell him. Why? Lucia felt a lump rising in her throat. He has a right to know. I wanted to tell you first, Carmen said softly. It should be your decision. Do you want to meet him? To know him? And him? Lucia hesitated. Does he have a family? Yes, Carmen nodded. A wife. 2 sons. One's around 30, the other 20. He seems happy, as far as I can tell. Lucia said nothing, absorbing it all. For years, she imagined a military father who had abandoned them. And now she discovered her real father had never even known she existed. As for me, Elena said, turning to Miguel, I also found your biological father. Alejandro Navarro. He lives in Barcelona now. Runs his own clinic. And you told him about me? Miguel asked quietly. No, Elena shook her head. Like Carmen, I believe that decision is yours. So we both aren't who we thought we were all our lives. Miguel turned to Lucia. Funny, isn't it? His voice wasn't bitter, just tinged with ironic acceptance. I think it's time we say the most important thing, Carmen straightened. Elena and I both believe we owe you something. We caused you so much pain with our silence and lies. That's why we've decided, Elena continued, not to interfere in your lives anymore. Whatever you choose, whether to be together or not, it will be your decision. Based on your feelings. Not the past you didn't choose. And one more thing, Carmen added, taking out an envelope. We saved up a bit for a down payment on an apartment. It won't make up for everything, but it might help you start a new life. Lucia and Miguel exchanged glances, speechless. Mom, Miguel finally said, turning to Elena. I don't blame you. You did what you thought was right. I'll need time to get used to the idea that Santiago wasn't my father, but you're still my mother. Thank you, son, Elena's eyes welled up. And Mama, Lucia turned to Carmen. I understand why you did it. It's not easy being alone in that situation. She paused, gathering her thoughts. As for my biological father, I'd like to meet him. Not to invade his life or demand anything. Just to know him. To see who I take after. Carmen exhaled in relief. I thought so, Carmen said, handing her daughter a business card. Here are his contacts. He knows I might reach out to him about something important. And you, Miguel? Elena asked. Do you want to meet Alejandro? Miguel paused. I don't know yet. I need time to think it through. But sooner or later, I'll probably want to see him. The rest of the evening passed in a calmer atmosphere. They talked about the future, Lucia's plans after graduating college, Miguel's thesis project. They tried to avoid the painful past, though awkward silences and unspoken thoughts still surfaced from time to time. When their mothers finally left, Carmen to spend the night with an old school friend, Elena to return home, Lucia and Miguel stayed alone in the living room. What an evening, Miguel said, flopping onto the couch and throwing his arms behind his head. I feel like a character in some insane soap opera. Lucia sat beside him and rested her head on his shoulder. How do you really feel? Honestly? He stared at the ceiling. Confused. Angry. Relieved. All at once. You? Pretty much the same, she smiled faintly. Plus fear. Fear? About what's next, for us, for my father, your father, all of it. Miguel turned to her and gently brushed a lock of hair from her face. You know what's the strangest thing? Through all this chaos, there's only one thing I'm certain of, my feelings for you. They haven't changed. Really? Lucia looked into his eyes. Even after you thought I was your sister? Especially after that, he said seriously. I tried to see you as my sister. I couldn't. The feelings didn't go away, they just hurt. Lucia hugged him tighter. I never stopped loving you either, Miguel. Not for a second. Then maybe, he said, taking her hands, we can just start over. Forget all this family mess that never really existed. Just be together, as two people who found each other despite everything. I'd like that, Lucia whispered. But first, I need to meet my father. Close that chapter. So I can start the next one, with you. Miguel kissed her gently. I understand. And I'll wait as long as it takes. A month later, Lucia nervously tugged on her bag strap, sitting on a park bench. She had arrived 30 minutes early, and every minute of waiting now felt endless. The day before, she had called the number her mother gave her. The dry male voice on the other end changed when she said she was Carmen Rodriguez's daughter. Ignacio Velasquez agreed to the meeting without hesitation. Lucia, she heard her name and looked up. A man in his mid-50s stood in front of her, with a neatly trimmed, graying beard and warm brown eyes, the same eyes she saw in the mirror. Hello, she said, standing up, unsure of what to do. I recognized you immediately, he said quietly. You look so much like your mother. And like me, when I was young. He awkwardly reached out a hand, then dropped it again. Can I hug you? Instead of answering, Lucia stepped forward and embraced him. A strange emotion washed over her, like finding something she had never had, but always longed for. I'm so sorry, Ignacio whispered, his shoulders trembling. If I had only known. It's all right, Lucia said, pulling back and wiping her tears. Let's just talk. We have a whole life ahead of us to catch up. It was a surprisingly warm, sunny autumn day. In a small lakeside restaurant, an unusual gathering had come together. Lucia and Miguel, their mothers, Ignacio Velasquez with his wife, and Alejandro Navarro, who had flown in from Barcelona specifically for this meeting. To new beginnings, Ignacio said, raising a glass of champagne. And to the family that finally came together, however unusual the path may have been. To family, everyone echoed. The past 6 months had been eventful for all of them. Lucia was finishing college and preparing to enroll in a culinary institute, where she had been offered a spot after winning a regional competition for young chefs. Miguel had defended his thesis and received a job offer from a promising construction firm. They had filed for marriage and were planning a wedding for the following summer. Ignacio Velasquez and his wife Nieves welcomed Lucia into their family without hesitation. Her half-brothers, initially cautious, quickly warmed to the idea of having a sister and now enjoyed spending time with her. Alejandro Navarro's case was more complicated. The news of an illegitimate son had shocked him. But after a few meetings with Miguel, they found common ground, shared interests, similar gestures, even a similar way of speaking. Carmen had moved to the city, renting a small apartment not far from her daughter. She took a job as a school librarian and, to everyone's surprise, began dating a longtime admirer, a history teacher from a nearby district. Elena continued teaching Spanish but had become softer and more patient with her students. Occasionally, she called her ex-husband, who had finally resurfaced in Lima, to share news about their son. Santiago was glad Miguel was doing well, but wasn't in a hurry to return to their lives. I'd like to say a few words. Miguel stood, holding Lucia's hand. I know people usually give speeches at weddings, but I can't stay silent now. He looked around at the people fate had brought together in such unexpected ways. A year and a half ago, I met a girl in a dark dorm hallway who had just lost all her money. I helped her. She made me dinner. It was the most ordinary evening, one of thousands. Who would have thought it would change our lives forever? Lucia squeezed his hand, encouraging him. We've been through a lot, Miguel continued. Lies, pain, betrayal, despair, but also love, loyalty, hope, and forgiveness. And I've learned one simple truth: it doesn't matter who we're born as. What matters is who we become and the choices we make every day. He raised his glass. To the choices we make with open eyes. To love, stronger than circumstance. And to all of you, our strange, complicated, but very real family. To love, everyone echoed. Lucia looked at the sunset reflected in the water of the city pond. Here, on this very spot, Miguel had once proposed. Back then, it felt like happiness could be shattered at any moment. Now, she knew, true happiness isn't the absence of problems, it's the ability to overcome them together. Miguel wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? How strangely everything turned out, she replied, turning to face him. Remember when we stood here that evening? So happy, so naive. If we had known what lay ahead, I would still have said yes, she finished confidently. Even knowing all the trials, because they brought us here. To this moment. To real happiness. Miguel kissed her gently. I love you, Lucia. And I'll love you for the rest of my days. On Lucia's finger sparkled the same modest silver ring he had given her the day he proposed. She could have replaced it with something more expensive now that Miguel was financially stable, but she treasured this ring. It was the symbol of their love, forged through trials. The first stars lit up over the city. The wind rustled the autumn leaves. Ahead of them was a whole life, full of joys and hardships, ups and downs. But Lucia knew, whatever came, they would face it together. I love you too, she whispered. I always have. And I always will. And in that moment, she was absolutely, infinitely happy.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.